Okay, I think on that note, we will get started. So I'm very delighted to welcome you here today for the latest webinar, the third one in a 5-part series, which is called Creating a League of Our Own, a Renewable Energy Cooperatives in Canada discussion series. This has been a joint effort of many different cooperative organizations, which I'll give some shout outs to shortly. My name is Diamond Eisinger, and I'm the Director of Advocacy for Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. I also live and work here in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is thankfully sunny here today. Hopefully you have sun in your corner of the world as well. And it is also the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. So wherever you are tuning in from, I encourage you to be aware of the lands on which you are living and working. As some of you know, this Renewable Energy Conversation series is about opportunities for shared leadership in our renewable energy cooperative world, opportunities to create better climate outcomes and a sustainable future. So by attending these events, you're connecting with peers from across Canada and beyond to share your knowledge and hopefully learn some new things from other people as well. This series builds on some recent academic research and work done by Marc-Andre Pigeon, who's here, Martin Boucher, who's here in the airport, hi Martin, and Renata Leonhard, who conducted a census on renewable energy cooperatives in Canada. That census helped identify all of the RECs across Canada and outline their successes and challenges. Some of the common successes and challenges that some of you may have experienced as well include challenges with scaling up and how to play a more prominent role in the energy sector, as well as how RECs can best unite together, a topic that we continue to explore during this series. Each installment of this discussion series will be held on the third Wednesday of each month between now and finishing up in May at 12 p.m. Saskatchewan time. So do the math from your time zone of choice. The sessions are on Zoom like this one, open and free for everyone, and also they are recorded. So the sessions will be available afterwards for you to refer back to. This discussion series is also important because it will be leading to an in-person gathering that will happen in May in Ottawa from the 25th to the 27th. At that event, different invited REC stakeholders and policymakers will be connecting about the learnings from the series and what next steps could look like for RECs to come together to create a league of your own, such as a league or federation or another model. You'll hear today from a speaker with some experience in that way in Europe and some lessons we can take from his experience. Now, last of all, just some special thanks to a growing list of organizations that have been involved in the efforts so far. In no particular order, thanks very much for support from Cooperators Insurance, Cooperatives First, the Alberta Community and Cooperatives Association, the BC Cooperative Association, the Canadian Centre for the Study of Cooperatives at the University of Saskatchewan, the International Centre for Cooperative Management at St. Mary's University, Royal Roads University, and Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. That is the most times I've said the word cooperative in a paragraph lately. But thank you to all those organizations for their partnership. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today's talk, who you'll hear from in just a moment. Dirk van Singen is president of the European Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives and brings lots of exciting expertise for us today. As a student, he was active in sorry, as I cough. He was active in the progressive student movement, the ecological movement, the anti-nuclear movement, and the peace movement in Flanders, Belgium. He was involved in founding the Green Party in Flanders and has been a member of the council of his municipality for 12 years. He co-founded a housing project in the watermill of Rotselaar, hopefully I pronounced that all right, and has been active in an NGO focused on co-housing, renewable energy, and monuments, as well as being active in some other organizations for the preservation of old wind and water mills. He co-founded the Citizen Energy Cooperative EcoPower, as well as several other organizations for renewable energy in Flanders. And he co-founded and was vice president of ResCOOP and is president of ResCOOP.eu since its foundation in 2013 as the Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives in Europe. EcoPower now has 65,000 members and supplies 1.7% of Flemish households with green electricity. They're also an associate member of Cooperatives Europe, the European branch of the International Cooperative Alliance, ICA, and Dirk is still a member of both organizations. So many hats and roles to juggle, but we're excited to have Dirk here today. So I'll pass it over to you.
So for me, I look for my presentation. It's there, yeah.
Currently seeing the presenter view there, Dirk.
I think Dirk is just frozen for a moment. He is very still, so we'll give him just a second to unfreeze.
Everyone is frozen.
Oh, you're unfrozen now. I can see you moving again.
Okay, yeah. I don't know what happened. You see my presentation, yes?
Yeah, we're just seeing it in presenter mode. I'm not sure if you're able to make the slide full screen on our side. It might be under display settings up at the top. There we go. Should be that top one.
Nope, doesn't work.
Well, we should be able to proceed as is. We can still see your presentation.
Okay. Okay, sorry for that. So, I chose as presentation the energy transition to energy democracy, because actually that's what is in few words the thing we are working on here in Europe. I wrote a little booklet in 2015. You can find it on our website, and there you will, if you read it, you will see where we come from, because a few years earlier we created the federation. So I was already introduced, so I'm standing there in front of the watermill where it all started for me. It's the history of this mill goes back to the 12th century, so it's a long history. That's the mill. When I came out of university, actually I studied linguistics. I wanted to become an organic farmer, but we didn't find a farm. We found an old derelict watermill that was a national monument. We bought it in 1985, and we created an NGO that if I translate it, it's trying to do it in a different way. So we came out of the green movement, the ecological movement that was emerging at that time in Belgium and all across Europe. There was an old turbine in this watermill, and it used to produce electricity for the village from in between 1907 and 1947. And since it was a national monument, we were urged to also restore this part of the historical building. And so we saw that we needed some money. We had to raise money, and we created a cooperative called EcoPower. And actually, the idea to create a cooperative came from Johan Hamels, who is living in Canada now. He became a Canadian, and I suppose he's here among the people present as well. So we the idea of producing electricity at that time, green electricity. We went to the distribution system operator, which was half owned by the monopolist, private monopolist in Belgium, and they told us they wouldn't buy our electricity. We would have to pay them to get rid of our electricity. So that was the economical framework. until the end of the 90s. And so we had to create a lobby organization, Eau de Vlaanderen, to overcome these obstacles, to get an economical framework. And then that's the whole series of organization I co-founded. So in the beginning, my cooperative was all alone as an energy cooperative in Belgium. But then by 2010, there were already a handful in Belgium, and we created the Belgian Federation. And actually, we did this to all these organizations were created to lobby, or in the decent word is to do advocacy for our cause. So to get an economical framework, to get a legal framework. And so in 2010, we created the Belgian Federation, in 2013, the European Federation. And then because most of it, of the energy legislation in Belgium is regionalized in between the 3 regions. So we created a French-speaking, the Walloon ResCOOP Wallonie in 2014. And in Flanders, a year later, we created ResCOOP Vlaanderen. So, what has this federation become now? This year, we're 10 years old. It's a not-for-profit association with French statutes. The name is the European Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives. And for us, the legal entity of our members is not that important. So we also have not-for-profit organizations or foundations or trusts. But actually, it's about groups of citizens who cooperate in the energy transition projects. So we now federate about 2,250 cooperatives, either directly. In some countries, there is no federation yet, or indirectly through now we have 17 federations and 77 individual members, some associate members. So that's we have a board of 8 cooperatives as well and 15 employees. So we always make an avatar of our people. So that's me with all my young colleagues. Yeah, a bit of fun. So what do these energy cooperatives do? They do quite diverse. They have quite diverse activities. Most common one is, of course, production of renewable energy, like Middelgrunde, for instance, in Copenhagen. They own 50% of the offshore wind farm out of the harbor of Copenhagen. Some of them also are suppliers, like Co-operative in the French part of Belgium. It's a cooperative of 8 cooperatives, if I'm not mistaken, or Enostra in Italy. Some of our members are distribution system operators. Some of them are very old, more than a century old. They were created at when the electrification of Europe started, but some of them are quite young, like the Steedwerke Schönau that was created in the late 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Some focus on IT services. We have members who focus on electrical vehicle sharing, and we brought them together. Now we have a European umbrella cooperative, which is called the Mobility Factory, and they share the same app. So they all have the same app to share cars. We have some cooperatives that focus on financing of energy cooperatives. And latest activity is that there are cooperatives that focus on renovation of houses. We call it citizen-led renovation. When you look at the map, you notice that it's more something, if you would see the figures as well, it's more something of Northwestern Europe than of Southern Europe. And in the former communist countries in the Balkan, we are almost absent. So this is a challenge for our federation. So we focus now mainly on expanding our movement to the former communist countries. So what do we do? So as a federation, the European Federation, we represent the voice of citizens and citizen energy cooperatives to the European policymakers. So note, it's not only the cooperatives we represent, but also the citizens. And to give you an example, in the introduction, it was said that my cooperative EcoPower has 65,000 members. Meanwhile, it's about 70,000. It goes rather fast. We are coming out of a serious energy crisis in Europe. And it turned out that our cooperative model of production, when you have production that balances the supply to the members, that we were able to offer our people the best, let's say the best tariff. I won't say cheap, it wasn't cheap, but the best tariff. So the big peak on the market was did not harm them. So, but half of our members, they also have solar panels on their roofs. So we also represent their interests as a private owner of solar panels. We support the startup of new ResCOOPs and provide them with trainings, useful tools and contacts. We have a dedicated website for this. And we provide services for them, for our members. We facilitate, of course, international exchanges and cooperation between energy cooperatives. And we promote the ResCOOP business model throughout Europe. So we focus mainly on Eastern Europe. So here you see a donut. So when we wrote our charter 10 years ago and we revised it 3 years ago, we didn't know the economical theory of the donut economy, Kate Raworth, University of Oxford, but it aligns very well with what we do, and we have very good contacts with this interesting the group around Kate Raworth. So our charter we worked quite long on it. We did it during a EU-funded project. But one of the issues we had is that we all use or misuse English as a sort of lingua franca among all the different the different countries in Europe. But we had to make definitions of words in English, because we might have a similar word in French than in English, but it often means something else. So we had to work quite hard on this charter and also on definitions of what do we really mean when we use this word. So it's worthwhile to look at it and figure out whether you need something like this in Canada as well. So I don't have time to go over what is in the charter, but it actually starts with our vision. So we were looking what's uniting us, because when the federation was created, there were already more than 4,000 initiatives across Europe. Not all of them will become a member. Not all of them are really working according to this charter, but let's say that we offer them a sort of golden standard of the ideal situation. Maybe they started 20 years ago or 30 years ago with another vision, other aims, but we are facing quite a lot of challenges, not only in Europe but all across the world. So so that's what our charter is about. So we promote a model based on cooperation, of course, a decentralized approach to the energy transition, one that gives the means to people across Europe to produce and consume their own energy and to invest together in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and other clean energy technologies. And we call this energy democracy. Energy democracy is also claimed by another movement, which is more. They are working on remunicipalization, so they plead to nationalize the energy production. So we don't really agree with them. But yeah, that's another. They also claim the word energy democracy. So so our common vision is based on various aspects. So a reduction of the energy consumption through a more rational energy use and energy efficiency. Last year I visited Montreal and I saw there was no snow on the roofs because there is no insulation. That's for us very, very strange. We see that we want to transition from fossil and nuclear to renewable energy sources. So this is not shared by everyone, of course, the nuclear part or even the fossil part. And of course, we want collaboration between partners. Actually, I don't have time to go over all this, but every sentence is important. So the charter is really the foundation of our federation and what we do. It's a direct democratic model for the energy market. Yeah. So there's also a mission, of course. So we choose to give every citizen and other local actors the chance to play an active role in the production, distribution, supply, and management of energy and related services. And then also very important, cost and benefits of projects must be shared in time and space between present and future generations. That's typical for cooperatives, between people close to the projects and beyond. And so, yeah. So there are very good reasons to start or join a community energy project. So we really believe that community energy and the transition to a fossil-free future and economy, that community energy is part of a solution needed to stop the climate crisis. Energy communities foster social acceptance for renewable energy. So wind turbine nearby or in your view from your house is likely to be more acceptable when it's owned by yourself and your neighbors than when it's owned by a foreign investor, for instance. So we also are able to fight, for instance, energy poverty, which is an issue in Europe. During the crisis, it turned out that half of the citizens of Brussels, so the capital of Europe, couldn't pay their energy bills anymore. So half of the population of Brussels was facing energy poverty. In Greece, it's more than half of the population. So, and it turned out we were able to provide at least our members with electricity at low cost, and some of our members earned a lot of money as well as when they only produce, and so now they are with the excess profits, they are setting up programs for energy poor households. So it also scientific research has also already shown that community energy project generates 3 to 8 times more local revenue than a project carried out by an external investor. They create jobs, it gives opportunities to the local economy, to rural areas. Yeah, so community energy also creates spaces to educate people on the issues of energy, on climate, and on democracy. So we really think it's a unique chance as well to find new balances between urban and rural, and for instance between north and south, and between the generation that's living now and those from the future. So it's of course we see all kinds of and we can show it that this works. So I have too many slides. So after a few years, we were able to convince the European Commission, which is, you could say, it's a sort of the administration of the European Union. We were recognized by them as stakeholders because we represent quite a lot of citizens and small businesses, although they are cooperatives and not for profit, but they're businesses anyway. And so unlike NGOs that are also in favor of community energy, we are the ones who are invited to talk to, for instance, the Directorate General of Competition. So if you're not a business, you don't come in their office. You're not invited, but we are recognized as a stakeholder, and we were able to give our input, and we did a tremendous effort together with what we call our allies from the Community Power Coalition. This is a network of a coalition of NGOs, like environmental NGOs, but also networks of citizens, municipalities, consumer organizations, and so on. And then we were also able to convince the different political fractions in the European Parliament, and also quite a lot of the member states, so that we got in when the European directives, which is the directives that's well, in Europe they make sort of framework, and then every member state has to introduce this in the legislation. There's also always some interpretation possibilities, but let's say that we got rights for citizens, so they were given a central place in the energy transition. And for the first time as well, Europe talked about people as citizens and not as consumers. Until then, Europe was more like an economical collaboration, but it seems it turns out more and more like a democracy when they start talking about us as citizens, not as consumers. So what all member states must do, however, so they can choose to do quite a lot of things, but they must look at the obstacles for energy communities. That's how we chose the name. We explicitly did not choose the word cooperatives, because in Eastern Europe this refers to communism. They're mistaken about this, but so we can't use the word cooperative in Eastern Europe because then the door closes immediately. So we call it energy communities, and they must not only look at the obstacles, but they must also create an enabling legal framework to support citizens and energy communities. So this transposition of these EU directives is now going on, and the enabling frameworks are coming slowly. So there are some front runners, some other member states, they don't really know what it's about, and they don't advance very fast. So that's this transposition progress. We monitor this constantly, and it's on our website, so we blame and shame a bit, and so we have influence with what we do on this topic. Some member states even ask us to advise them how to proceed in this transposition. So these are some websites. I hope I didn't take too much time so that you can proceed. Yeah.
You took the perfect amount of time, Dirk. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right on the dot. So thanks for your presentation and for walking us through some things. I just wanted to give people a heads up that we will be shortly moving into some breakout groups where you'll have the chance to have some small group conversations with other peers. But first, I wanted to pose a question to you, Dirk. And you talked a bit about some of the challenges faced. I also see Stan has put in the chat a copy of the charter. I'm curious if you can expand a little bit further in more sort of a list of what you identify as being the top challenges or opportunities in Europe. And in a small group setting, I think we'll take the chance to try to contrast that to Canada and think about whether the same challenges are in place or whether we face a different set of challenges. But I see from your charter, for example, you call out environmental challenges, economical and geopolitical, social, and challenges for the commons. So do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, so the challenges we have faced in the past, and I can go back to the end of the 19th century when the first cooperatives were created. So what was a challenge then? That was that the rural and mountainous areas were not electrified, or how do you say it? There was no electrification of the rural, and because there was no money to be made, and that's when, in some areas, the public utilities were created, but there were, for instance, in Germany, there were more than 6,000 electricity cooperatives created. Only 40 of them survived Nazism, communism, and neoliberalism. That's one of my favorite sentences. So, but and then we saw another wave of when energy cooperatives were created. It was always with the first oil crisis in 1973, for instance. So then people started building experimental wind turbines, and there was research on solar panels and so on. And then there was another crisis in '79, and then there was Chernobyl, and then the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl, and then we had Fukushima. And after every crisis that was there, people created energy cooperatives in Europe. And of course now we are faced with the war in Ukraine. It caused a severe energy price, right? So there was no shortage actually of gas and oil, but the prices were going through the ceiling. Yeah? So it's and again, people then go to the cooperative model. And so in a week, I'm giving a TED talk in Prague, and I will ask the people, why do we always forget when the crisis is over that we needed the cooperative model to go through the crisis? So let's stick to it. Let's work on a cooperative economy for the world, and progress through cooperation instead of competition.
Terrific. Thanks very much. So I think there could be some parallels there, especially in terms of your first point about populous versus more rural regions of our very vast country here in Canada. But I think with those comments from Dirk, we'll now look to move you into some breakout rooms. So Stan is going to work some Zoom magic where you should receive a prompt on the screen that asks you to accept an invitation to move to another spot. Stan has also dropped into the chat the specific question if you want to circle back to it, which is that Dirk has described some of the challenges and opportunities for RECs in Europe, particularly in the context of their organization as an apex or federation organization. What do you see as the challenges and opportunities if we had a Canadian equivalent to ResCOOP here in Canada? Okay, so I think folks have rejoined us, those that made it into and back out of the breakout room. So thank you very much. Hopefully you had some insightful, though always too brief conversations. I wonder if anyone wants to, and I know it's always hard to get the conversation going, but any quick kind of reflections on what your group was chatting about, or any things to share with the broader group. If there's no hands, I can put someone on the spot like Marc-Andre, but oh, and Marc-Andre puts up his hand. Marc-Andre, go ahead. So
I don't want to preempt anyone. You can consider me as an inventory hand. If
a backup hand.
To jump in.
Does anyone have a non-backup hand of a reflection to share?
Julie, I see Julie's physical hand went up.
Yes, so. Julie, over to you.
Sure. Our group, actually, same thing. We just ran out of time, but there were some really excellent points made about the importance of financing and how there needs to be a two-level game going on at the federal level, pulling in financing, but because electricity and all the energy regulations are provincial, this is not my point, that the action needs to be at the provincial level, pushing for regulatory change and all of this stuff. But in terms of financing, the capacity is just so limited at the organizational level that we need grant funding and foundation funding and everything from across the country. So, I mean, there was just so much knowledge in our group. It's just brilliant.
Fantastic. Thanks, Julie. Anyone else before I go to Marc-Andre, who's always reliable for a hand up? I see there's also some items being shared in the chat just for resource sharing. Okay, Marc-Andre, you're up then.
Okay, so my group didn't have anyone from a renewable energy cooperative, so that made the conversation a little bit challenging. But people did observe that you know, of course, energy generally is produced by monopolistic kind of entities at the provincial level, and that's where a lot of the action is written. Kind of repeating what Julie said. But we also had someone in our group who's a very strong supporter of cooperatives, but has an engineering background and raised some traditional concerns around the viability of having small scale producers. And from a technical, economic, and management perspective, this person felt like it was, this may be an area where the cooperatives are barking up the wrong tree. So that was kind of led to an animated conversation that got cut off before we could join you again. But one last point, I think that, you know, I brought up this point of the Dirk raised, which I found really interesting, this idea of the citizen having a right to kind of energy autonomy almost, or production. You know, that idea I think was what got us going near the end and brought up that conversation. I really like that notion. Love to see that explored more.
Awesome, thank you. And I think Dion has a hand up.
One of the things our group talked a lot about was this idea of like what a federation model would look like, or what a sort of this apex organization, much like ResCOOP, might look like in sort of solving some of the coordination problems associated with the sort of sector. And there's benefits in this space for that, because it is a sector that kind of has overlapping interests. But the challenges in terms of sort of, if you were to think about that kind of an organization, how would it be funded? In the diversity of members, how would you like address all of the different needs? There's jurisdictional issues in Canada, even within Saskatoon. As just a city, we have energy provided by SaskPower and the city of Saskatoon. So there's all of these like really big challenges in thinking about a federated model for sort of some kind of apex organization. But Canadians understand this kind of approach. There are some successful examples in Canada of this model. So we had a lot of conversation about that.
Great, and your comments have spurred a few more hands. I will caution we are low on time, so any final comments or points, if you can keep them brief, that would be fabulous. I think that is Dick Backer, or as far as I can tell from the username there. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I'm especially interested in what Europe has done, or what Dirk has done in Belgium to represent citizen energy. And in Canada, that can be called citizen energy, or to be technical, distribution grid connected energy. Engineers will always want a big power plant at the far end of the province and feeding the dumb receiving consumers. We need to move to generation close to consumption. And that ties in with what co-ops do at the mid-scale, small scale, like houses, schools or factories or apartment buildings, but also what the individual consumers can do on their homes. And that is the part of the energy sector that is disregarded, ignored, and downplayed constantly in North America. And Europe is further ahead of us on that, partly because of the work that Dirk and others have done over there. And it's almost impossible to get people to think that they can be a producing part, a productive part of the electricity grid in this continent. Enough said.
Thanks for the comments. And I saw you got an applause emoji while you were speaking. So you have some agreement out there from some. So final two comments, I'll just give it briefly to Stephen and then Tom before we wrap up.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. From my perspective, I guess a center for best practices, and that's where I admit I need to avail myself more and become more familiar with Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada, and also Marc-Andre, your work and the different resources that are out there. But just in our discussion, I realize I think we can learn a lot from each other, share best practices and whatnot, and also, of course, working together on advocacy is definitely valuable. And then just one comment about the presentation, which was really wonderful and eye-opening. Just the situation in Ukraine is also just another argument for distributed energy. Obviously not everyone is looking at a kind of war situation, but with changing climate and increasing risks of existing infrastructure, just having more of it distributed is just one more argument on top of all the great ones that have been raised.
Thanks, great point. Tom, over to you for a final 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, just very quickly, with regard to the concern about whether or not cooperatives would have the technical expertise or could, small local co-ops, all they have to do is federate. And if you look at cooperatives in Europe, and not only the power co-ops, but if you look at places like Mondragon and Italy, the level of technical expertise is very high. And this is not an insurmountable problem at all.
Thanks for that parting comment. So just by way of a super quick wrap up, I want to thank everyone, but especially thank Dirk for his presentation and joining us in the evening, his time to connect with folks here in Canada and beyond. Just a reminder that this series does repeat itself monthly until May. So next month's session will be the third Wednesday in April, and our speaker will be Stephen K. Irwin, CEO and founder of Amicus Solar Co-op, for a talk entitled Scaling RECs, Lessons from a Successful Multi-Stakeholder Network in the Solar Energy Industry. So you can register for that online, I believe now or shortly, so stay tuned. And there are many other upcoming events and opportunities which we'll continue to promote through our networks. Thanks so much for coming. Stay tuned for a recording of this session as mentioned, so you can refer back to this. Have a terrific day.